Hi, I'm Heather. Welcome to class. Today we're going to do a slow-paced forward bend session and we're going to be holding each pose for 2 minutes. This is in keeping with the notion of timings or holdings, which is an aspect of Iyengar yoga. One of the reasons we practice timings, particularly in this forward bending sequence, is to really allow the nervous system to respond to the quietening nature of the forward bends. We're going to use support for the forehead to rest on. So I suggest that if you feel stiff in the hamstrings or stiff in the hips and coming into forward bends is challenging for you, you bring a chair in so that you can lean forward and rest your forehead on the chair. And before we begin, I invite you to subscribe to this YouTube channel, to like, share and comment so that your actions contribute to YouTube's algorithm sharing this content with other people who are searching for inspiration for their yoga practice. Before we begin, if you find this video helpful, be sure to like and subscribe. You will note I've got a blanket on which I'm going to sit and I've got a bolster that I'm going to use as forehead support. But as I said, if coming into forward bends is really problematic for you, use a chair. And I'll give you an example. If you imagine I've got a chair here, I'll have it over the shins and I'd come forward with my forearms onto the seat of the chair and my forehead on the forearms. And even still, for some people, it may even be helpful to add more height to the chair. Perhaps you put a bolster on the chair so it's easier for you to come forward and be in that restful state, which is what we're looking for today. But sitting on a blanket is really helpful because the height just allows for a bit more ease in our hip flexion. So do have a blanket. The higher the blanket, the more you'll find that you'll be able to fold forward. So again, if you feel stiff, give yourself a good height, whether it's a very thick blanket or it's a couple of blankets on top of each other. The first pose we're going to do is Janu Sirsasana. So I'm just leaving my bolster to the side for now while I take the right knee out to the side. Before I do that, I want to change the blanket so it's diagonally leaning back on the right side. So I take the right side of the blanket back as I then bring the right knee back out to the side and down to the floor. Clearly, if knees are problematic, you're going to have to navigate what's a suitable position for you and your knee. And I've talked about knees in other videos, so I'm not going to spend time on that today. Whatever support you're using for the forehead to come to rest on, get that ready over your shin. I've got my trusty clock here, so I'm going to keep an eye on the time as we are in the forward bend. When you prepare to come forward, just make sure this left leg is switched on. You're pressing the thigh bone down, you're rolling the inner thigh down, the toes are pointing to the ceiling, that leg's not relaxing and rolling out to the side. Come forward. And you can choose to potentially hold the foot or just bring your forearms onto the bolster and perhaps rest your forehead on your hands or your forearms. Or maybe the forehead goes all the way to the bolster. But we've started the timing and we intend to slow the breath down. So as we find our way in the pose, we keep the left leg firmly switched on, left thigh pressing down, and even the head of the right shin presses down, from which you can move the right chest further around and forward towards that left leg. Consciously slow your breath down. The slowing of the breath is going to contribute to the feeling of ease and well-being that we're looking to promote through this long-held forward bend practice. Smooth, slow, steady inhalation. Smooth, slow, steady exhalation. Now we slowly come up and out of the pose, and I do mean slowly because we're wanting to soothe and settle the nervous system. We want to come out of the pose slowly so that we stay unruffled, we keep ourselves quiet. As we swap sides, you'll stretch right leg forward and then move the left side of the blanket back on the diagonal and bend the left knee out to the side. The left thigh can be supported on the blanket, but the left shin and ankle and front foot are on the sticky mat. Get your support, put that over your shin and roll the inner right thigh down, keeping the kneecap and the toes facing the ceiling. Then we come forward and we find the support for our forehead. And again, it may be your chair, it may be your bolster on the chair, it may be your forearms on the bolster, but find what's going to work and we stay. Because we're intending to stay for quite some time, we don't want to be at our 100% in the stretch. We need to find a happy medium where there may be sensation of stretch, but that it's tolerable enough that we can sustain the pose without tension. In fact, we want to diminish tension. And we use our breath to help that. Slow the breath down and particularly lengthen your exhalations. Smooth, slow, steady inhalation. Smooth, slow, steady exhalation. And then let's come up and out of the pose. Again, just move slowly and we'll move on to straightening that blanket so that we're sitting in Dandasana. The next pose is Ardha Baddha Padma Paschimottanasana, the half-bound lotus seated forward bend. We can bring that right leg into Padmasana if possible. If not possible, then perhaps you repeat Janu Sirsasana, the pose that we just did. Or to emulate the position of the Padmasana leg, you could potentially do this variation with your right foot under your left thigh. You're still working with that right thigh externally rotating. Either way, let's get the support over the left leg, ensure that the left kneecap and toes are facing the ceiling, and we'll come into our forward bend, resting the head down. And you'll note I've got my elbows supported on the bolster so that they're not draping down to the floor and causing a less space here in the armpit chest. The armpit chest lengthens forward as much as the breastbone lengthens forward, and we want there to be some space there by keeping the elbows up. Not through any effort, but through the use of the props. Once more, let's be aware of the breath and consciously slow the breath down, particularly the exhalations. And let's make our way up and out of the pose. And we'll straighten the right leg. Then bring left leg into Padmasana or your variation, whether it's a Janu Sirsasana leg or you place the right foot underneath the upper right thigh. Keep the inner right thigh rolling down. Have your support ready there over your leg. Come forward and find your place for resting the forehead. If at any stage when you're doing a practice like this, agitation sets in and a feeling of wanting to come out of the pose earlier than the 2-minute hold, it may be that you are forcing yourself to hold in a deeper expression of the pose than what is necessary for a long supported posture or a long supported practice as we're doing today. So pull back a little bit and see if that helps. We're certainly not wanting to end up feeling agitated or irritated. We want to create the opposite, the feeling of being nurtured and quietened. And then slowly make your way up. The left leg can stretch forward. Then we'll set for Triang Mukaikapada Paschimottanasana, the 3-limbed face to one leg seated forward bend. We're going to use our blanket underneath the left buttock, but what can be helpful is creating a little more height. So perhaps you can fold your blanket over again and sit just the left buttock on that height as you then bring the right leg into Virasana. Outer right hip rolls down, inner left thigh rolls down, and we place our support over the lower leg. Again, we come forward and we find support for the forehead. And slow your breath down. Deliberately lengthening your exhalations. And slowly come up. And remove the support over the leg. Bring your right leg forward and shift your blanket from under the left buttock to being under the right buttock. Right leg straight, left leg in Virasana. If Virasana is not manageable for you because of knee concerns, you can potentially do this sitting on a chair with the left leg emulating the Virasana and the right foot pushing onto a wall. The bolster or your chair over the right leg, and you come forward for your support. Resting the forehead down and slowing the breath down. Deliberately slow your exhalations down, and as a response to that, you invite a greater volume of air in, and perhaps you can also slow your inhalations down. Keep your outer left hip rolling down and your inner right thigh rolling down. And slowly make your way up. And we'll straighten the left leg, but you might like to take the blanket out from under the right buttock, bring the left leg forward, and we can unfold that blanket and come back onto the lower level blanket unless the higher blanket suits you for Paschimottanasana. It translates as the intense stretch to the west side of the body pose. Sometimes we shorten that to our seated forward bend. Legs are together. Inner thighs roll down, inner feet press forward away from the groins. Come forward and find your support. Draw the shoulders away from the neck, away from the head. Press your thigh bones down. Now, as we come to sit, we're going to stay seated for a moment and just allow ourselves to observe the residue of that practice. Find a comfortable seated position, and whether that's a simple cross-leg position or whether you keep your legs extended in front of you. But you sit straight, close your eyes. Try not to make too many adjustments. We don't want to disturb our state. And as I said, we notice the response in our nervous system, in our state of mind, to the practice of long held forward bends. We observe the residue of that in our system, our nervous system. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and finish up with the practice. As I mentioned, one of the purposes of doing long held forward bends is to really reap the benefits of the soothing, calming, quietening nature of those poses. Ideally, that is how you have responded to the practice. But as I said, if irritation sets in or you're starting to feel agitated within the practice, within the poses, I suggest you pull back a bit and perhaps not go so deeply. Maybe you hold for only 1 minute rather than 2 minutes. See how you go with that. If you enjoy practicing with me, I invite you to check out the video library on my website, heatherkitchenyoga.com.au, with over 460 full-length classes, and I add a new class every week. I invite you to start your subscription with a 7-day free trial. That's it for today. Thanks for joining me. For more in-depth teaching, check out the video library on my website, heatherkitchenyoga.com.au. The link is in the description box below.